Oklahoma has produced many elite quarterbacks, from national champions to Heismans and #1 picks in the NFL draft. But the guys on the receiving end of the ball rarely seem to get the credit they deserve. In this video, I rank the 10 best Sooner receivers of all time, and we start out with a fan favorite, Malcolm Kelly. Kelly played 3 seasons for the Sooners and was a starter from day one, leading the team in catches his freshman year. His sophomore year was when he really staked his claim to wide receiver 1, going for 62 catches for nearly 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns. He followed it up with another great season, over 800 yards and 9 touchdowns, but he's most well known for his ability in the clutch, and his ability on the mic. When he left OU for the NFL, he was top 5 in school history in career receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns, and maintains a top 10 spot in each. Number 9 is Tinker Owens. This list is full of modern day players, but I wanted to give some credit to a couple guys who played the game before the air raid took flight, and I start with Owens. Although his career was a little less glamorous than his brother Steve, Tinker was one of the great receivers of the early Sooners era, and even set a receiving record for yards as a freshman that wouldn't be broke for 27 years. Although the 2-time All-American wasn't targeted as much as many others on this list, when he did, it was for big gains, with a career 23 yards per reception, sending him at 4th all-time in Sooner history. At 8, I have Eddie Hinton, another player who was an excellent receiver, just a bit before his time. One of Hinton's most impressive feats is that he had a 1,000-yard receiving season out of the wishbone. To give some perspective, today that lands him at 12th in most single-season receiving yards in Oklahoma history. In fact, he was OU's only 1,000-yard receiver for a span of 35 years. When he left Norman, he held quite a few records, becoming the school leader in career and single-season catches, yards, and touchdowns. At the number 7 spot is Jermaine Gresham. Yes, I know he technically isn't a receiver, but he is undoubtedly one of the most dynamic tight ends in Sooner history, and he truly excelled in the passing game. He started out slow as a freshman, but broke out over the next 2 years, his junior year being his best, catching 66 passes for 950 yards and 14 touchdowns while netting All-America honors that year. Gresham's stars shone brightest in big game situations, and he was a key target for Sam Bradford during his Heisman winning campaign. Marquise Brown speeds in at number 6. Oklahoma has had some great luck with transfers, and Brown ranks high on the list. Coming in from College of Canyons Junior College, Brown burst onto the scene in Norman. The speedster would have an immediate impact for the Sooners, catching 57 passes for over 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns. He followed it up with a huge senior season, making a name for himself as one of the best wide receivers in the nation and claiming first-team All-America honors, catching 75 passes for over 1,300 yards and 10 touchdowns. Brown currently sits at 7th in career receiving yards and 11th in touchdowns despite only playing 2 years for OU. He also holds the single-game receiving yards record, a 265-yard explosion against rival Oklahoma State. And if you want to know who's in second place, it's Brown again, with a 243-yard game against West Virginia. Number 5 is Sterling Shepard. Shepard's name honestly doesn't get mentioned as much as it should when the topic of Sooner greats comes up, but the legacy receiver was an absolute stud. Shepard played all 4 years for Oklahoma and saved his best season for last, putting up almost 1,300 yards and 11 touchdowns his senior year. He has staked his claim in the OU record books, currently sitting at 2nd in career receiving yards and receptions and 4th in receiving touchdowns. I'd affectionately call him the Landry Jones of Oklahoma receivers, often lost in the shuffle, but statistically one of the best to ever do it in the Crimson and Cream. Number 4 is Mark Clayton. Clayton is one of, if not my favorite Sooner receiver of all time, but he also has the stats and accolades to back it up. After redshirting during OU's 2000 national championship winning season, he proceeded to start the next 4 years. His junior and senior year, he lit up opposing defenses, as the 2-time All-America selection put up a total of 2,300 yards and 23 touchdowns during that period. Clayton is currently 3rd in career receptions and touchdowns and 4th in career receiving yards in OU history. D.D. Westbrook is number 3. What did I tell you about transfers? It isn't a stretch to say that Westbrook is the best transfer wide receiver in Oklahoma history, and one of the greatest transfer wideouts of all time. After landing in Norman following playing for Blinn Junior College, Westbrook proceeded to have 2 stellar years for the Sooners. His first season saw him get his bearings and adjust to Division I play, and boy did he adjust, because his senior year was something special. In my opinion, the greatest single year by a receiver in OU history. 80 receptions, over 1,500 yards, and a school record 17 touchdowns. an invite to the Heisman Trophy ceremony, and the first Sooner to win the Fred Biletnikoff Award as college football's best receiver. Despite his short stint in Norman, Westbrook still sits in the top 10 in career receiving yards and touchdowns for OU. Coming in at number 2, I have CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee and Marquise Brown formed a dangerous duo at receiver his first 2 years in Norman. Despite being wide receiver 2, CeeDee had an instant impact and was consistently a big play threat, putting up nearly 2,000 yards and 18 touchdowns. His junior year, Lamb was the undisputed number 1 target and was selected as a consensus All-American, going for over 1,300 yards and 14 touchdowns. It felt like nearly every time he touched the ball it was for a huge gain, averaging over 21 yards per reception that season. One of his most impressive feats was putting up 3 consecutive great seasons with 3 different quarterbacks throwing him the ball. Granted, he did have the blessing of having 2 Heismans and 1 runner-up at the helm. Not surprisingly, CeeDee is also all over Oklahoma career record books. 3rd in career receiving yards, 6th in receptions, and 2nd in touchdowns. When you break down the top 10 best individual seasons for a Sooner receiver in school history, CeeDee is also one of the 2 Oklahoma players to have multiple seasons in the top 10 with 2. The number 1 player stakes his claim to 3 of the top 10 spots, and that's Ryan Broyles. I honestly don't even think it's close here. Broyles tops the Oklahoma career record books in virtually everything. 1st in receiving yards, receptions, and touchdowns, with a total of 349 receptions for over 4,500 yards and 45 touchdowns. But his name doesn't just appear on Oklahoma's career record books. He is 3rd in career receptions and receiving yards in NCAA history and 6th in career receiving touchdowns, leading the Big 12 in each of those categories. He is also the only Oklahoma player with 3 seasons of 1,000 or more receiving yards. The gap would be even more significant if Broyles hadn't gone down with a knee injury late in his senior season. The 2-time consensus All-American tops my list and stakes his claim to being the greatest Oklahoma receiver of all time. But in today's day and age, with the fast-paced spread offenses and prolific quarterbacks Oklahoma has churned out seemingly every season, who knows who the next great Sooner wide receiver could be? My bet is on Marvin Mims potentially claiming a spot on this list in the near future. As with any list, you know there's always a bit of controversy, so let me know in the comments section what I got right and what I got wrong. If you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps me out a bunch. Check out this video here, and as always, have a great day and see y'all at the next one.